Hello, everybody, and welcome. I'll start saying that I have some stickers here, and I brought some books that I read recently. Two of them are already taken, so there's one there. I must say it's not really good, but still, if you find it interesting, just take it. I just don't want to keep it at my home. My name is Juan Pablo. My mom calls me Juan Pablo. Nobody calls me Juan Pablo except her. Everybody calls me Juampy since I'm very little. My last name initials are Novillo Requena, hence the NR on my nickname. That's on Twitter, GitHub, Drupal.org. I mentioned Drupal because most of the projects that I worked, they have Drupal as a CMS, and then there are other things around and third-party systems, so that's why I'm mentioning it. And I am a senior developer at Lullabot. Lullabot is a design, strategy, and development company. They are based in the United States, but there is no office. So we are 60 people, and out of those 60, 40 are in the United States, 6 are in Canada, we are 7 in Spain, and 3 in the UK. And everybody works from home or remotely. We usually do consultancy and development projects for large media corporations in the United States or governments. Here are some of the clients I've been working lately. I'm currently working, for example, for NBC News. They have a couple big projects running on Drupal. One is NBC News, the other one is Today, and I'm helping them, giving them consultancy. And I'm a senior developer, so most of what I do is coding, but I love process. I love automating things, and it's something that I started doing like every day a little, and then I started giving value for clients, so they started giving me more time to do more sort of automation and CI. So that's why I started getting more and more in love with everything that is DevOps. So I consider myself a beginner here. I'm having a lot of fun because there's a lot of people who's talking about things that I've just heard of. So I'm not talking about you, but I'm really happy about how the event is going. Oh, and I also love playing squash. I don't know if you know about it, but it's a fun sport. Here is a short agenda. I'm going to give an introduction of where I'm giving this session. My findings on CI tools are based on either personal experience that I had on client projects or research that I've done to compare different tools. I've classified them on open source tools and software as a service ones, and we'll see them in detail. We'll see, in particular, the feature set, which is like a table I've made with things that I found interesting to choose between each of these CI tools. My personal experience going in a large project from Jenkins to Circle CI, some books I found that are interesting, and links. This is a graph that I found recently in a book I was reading called The Lean Startup. Besides, somebody took the book because I got it here. And I liked it because here is the bit that we're gonna focus today. Startups are all the time building things, measuring them, and learning, and doing this process. This applies to pretty much every development project. You want to experiment quickly and release features quickly so you can verify if you're on the right track or not. So building involves getting everything you need together, getting something up and running, and maybe running some tests. It doesn't matter if you're deploying that to production or development, you want to verify things quickly. So here is the bit that we're gonna focus on today. I'm not gonna, well, actually, I may be able to click, because this was a clip, but it's not auto-starting. I just wanted to get something in the background. Oops, doesn't seem to be. Okay, I'm gonna skip this, because I don't know why it's not playing. That was a video. I wanted to give a quick overview of what it's like doing continuous integration with Circle CI. Since the video is not playing, can I play with raising hands? Who has done any Jenkins development, for example, in the past? Setting up jobs, okay. How about other tools like Circle CI, Travis CI, what else? GitHub Actions, okay. So usually this video was just a very simple example from Circle CI where there's a YAML file with some jobs, running some things, and then the Circle CI dashboard telling you this is passing or not. So let's skip that one. I classified these tools based on whether they are open source. Some of them may be free or not, and which ones they take care of the hosting, and you are paying for the service, so they can run the jobs for you. When I looked on open source ones, Jenkins, I've used it a lot. I haven't used any of these, but they have tons of stars on GitHub and activity. Has anybody here used BuildBot? This one is CI Go, I think, because it's not just Go, the name, or Strider. This resonates to anybody? Okay. However, they were really, really active. But by far, I think that out of the open source ones, Jenkins is very, very popular. While I was doing research, I found also Jenkins X, which is, I'm seeing some people nodding, so I guess that you have heard about it. I did some reading because I haven't tried it myself. What I found out about Jenkins X is that they wanted to leverage Kubernetes to do CI. I found an article, in case anybody here is interested, they have a Dropbox paper with some resources for this presentation. Pinterest moved all their infrastructure, the CI infrastructure, to Jenkins X. And it's a nice article, and at the end of the article, the author says, so, do I recommend Jenkins X for everybody? No. They suffered a lot, they're happy with what they got, but they say that it's still a long way until Jenkins X can be as powerful as any of the other competitors in the CI world. So I'm talking just here about research. I haven't experienced this myself. As for the others, I've done a lot of Circle CI. For some reason, some of the clients I've been working lately, they had a contract with them. And then as for the others, Travis, because of open source projects, I found many open source projects in GitHub that they use Travis as their CI, so I've been exposed to that. While GitLab and GitHub is just because I've been writing articles and publishing on GitHub like installers to speed up the setup process to set up CI on a given project. And people ask me, like, have you done the same thing with GitLab? So I tried that. And then lately I did the same with GitHub Actions. We'll get into, especially the software as a service ones, in detail in a bit. Here's a few pros and cons that I found on this based on the previous classification. For open source one, such as Jenkins, well, pros, you have full control. You get a server, you install Jenkins, and then that's it. It's free. We'll get into why I'm doing this thing later. And the cons is that you have to maintain the infrastructure. I suffered that, and I'm going to tell my personal story on what sort of challenges I had to face there. While software as a service tools such as Travis or Circle CI, you have a very quick setup. Put a template on your repository, commit, push, there you go. You get a dashboard that is telling you whether your job is passing or not. And then in case you need it, upscaling, like having more concurrency or more CPU or memory on your jobs, it's straightforward. You just need to pay. And the problem you have, it's infrastructure, lack of control with infrastructure. If you need to really tweak some of the underlying infrastructure that is running your jobs, you may need to, for these cases, talk to them and maybe go enterprise and install it on your own premises. That would be your choice. However, I've had experiences where we were having issues with CPU and memory with Circle CI, and just by us talking to them, they said, look, we're going to give you a different machine to run these jobs just so we can debug and you can verify if it's more power that you need or not. So in our case, they were very flexible. Going back to Jenkins, this is the way I started with CI. I had some in a project years ago, Jenkins box, and it's great if you have never done CI because wow, everything happens on the screen. You click around here, you install plugins there. You don't have to even leave the web interface. Problem I found with this was once things get very complicated, that's when it's not as intuitive and easy. But it's great to start. Here's another clip that I am going to skip because probably it won't play. And some of the bad things I found with Jenkins over time is that because everything happens through the UI, it's really hard to keep things under version control. pipelines came up as a solution in Jenkins to have a Jenkins file in your repository. I haven't got to the point where I use this because I moved to Circle CI before putting that into practice. What I found out reading is that many plugins in the Jenkins world are not compatible with the pipelines file. So there are still some downsides there. What else? We'll get into that later. You don't have to pay a license, but you'll have to maintain the server. So coming back to software as a service tools, again, this is Circle CI, Travis, GitLab, GitHub Actions. It's funny that these four, they are very similar. There are few things that one can do, the other can't, but the process for you to start using any of these in a project is like this. You go to the site, you authenticate with your, depending on the tool you want to use, GitHub, Bitbucket, or GitLab. You grant access to these tools to your repository, so it starts listening for changes. And then once you commit something with a template that they will provide to you, it starts running. And then you start this really fun process where you start trying to get that job to pass and start doing things that are really interesting for you. But it's the same. And I can tell by because of my research that you pretty much can do everything with the four tools. It's just that some of them make things easier than others, but there's not a huge difference. I've taken here 4 screenshots of each of them. What I started doing is, because I mainly work with projects using Drupal as a CMS, I wanted to have a quick way of giving a project in Drupal. If I want to do CI with Circle CI, for example, have an installer that you could run locally and calls to a repository and sets up some files with a workflow, something that you can just commit and push, and automatically you have things like code coverage reports or coding standards reports or unit tests, end-to-end tests, things like that. So these small snippets are a simplified version with a little bit of those examples. It's a repository in GitHub that I've listed at the end. It's Drupal related, but you just need to tweak it to fit your needs. In the end, Drupal it's not more than PHP, a database, and a couple of things more. This is for Travis CI. Same thing, it's another YAML file. You define services, such as, for example, here, let's get into a little bit detail. Here I'm saying which directories within the project I want to cache. In this case, because this is PHP, it's using Composer as a dependency manager, so I want to cache all the Composer libraries that I'm using. I'm using Docker as a service here, and then I'm wrapping all my logic in something called Robo. It's a task runner for PHP. And then I'm using what Travis calls the matrix, so I can run 3 different jobs out of one as a workflow. As for GitLab is slightly different than the others, and I was gladly surprised when I started testing it, because while Travis and Circle and GitHub Actions, they do GitHub Actions, because it's GitHub, it does also hosting for your repository and more tools. But Travis and Circle CI are more about CI, while GitLab, they want to do everything. Everything. They give you tools for everything, for good or for bad. But what I found interesting about this is that when I started passing my jobs from it, at that point I was using Travis to GitLab CI. I found that okay, so I can do CI with GitLab CI. That's great. I have a custom Docker image. Usually I would push that Docker image to Docker Hub or Quay. Well, the thing is that GitLab, they also have an image hosting system attached to your repository. So you can have in one single place your repository and your images, which is great. Then I found out that they do everything. Like, they want you to do everything on your company related with development within their infrastructure. I haven't tried it all, but what I've seen so far is great, and they have great documentation. So really good experience with GitLab so far. As with GitHub Actions, I think they released the beta for this a year and a half ago, and I just did a test. And to be honest, I didn't fully complete this because what got me not stuck, but what made me stop for a little bit was the fact that it's not easy to debug a job. It doesn't offer you the ability that you have with other tools to, for example, jump into a failed job with an SSH connection or run the job locally. So with these kind of scenarios, the problem is that the job fails, so unless you get a nice error message, you have to make a commit and then push and wait, see if it's red or green. No, again, a commit, push. That's really time consuming. While the other tools, they allow you to either run the job locally or run the job remotely, but open an SSH connection so you can debug what's going on there. That saves you a ton of time. Here is the table, the feature set. These are the things that I found interesting while evaluating each of these CI tools. All of them, as I said, they have, sorry, I'm not pointing here, so if you're looking here, I'm sorry, so I haven't realized. All of them have versionable workflow, which means what I mean here is the file that you can have in your repository. All of them allow you to store artifacts. An artifact is like something resulting from your job that you want to keep. Let's say that can be a package release of the software you were building, or screenshots of your end-to-end tests, whatever you want to keep around once the job has finished. All of them supported. Caching system, they are all the same, except from GitLab CI, unless the issue that it has been closed recently, they still don't support doing that thing, checksum of a file. If you haven't used any caching strategies from any of these CI tools, it's common that when you want to define a caching strategy, in the case of PHP, for example, the typical dependency manager is Composer, and Composer, after you have run it and it has downloaded all of the dependencies, it creates a file called composer lock. I think that in NPM is package.lock. Actually, they took the idea from Composer because they didn't have this before. And checksum, that file generates a hash. So what that means is that, let's say I create a pull request, and this is the first time that the CI tool runs. So there's no cache entry there. It generates a cache entry for this at the end of the job. And then the next time somebody creates a pull request, if that person hasn't dealt with the dependencies, therefore composer.log hasn't changed, then the previous version of the cache version of the dependencies is loaded. So for some reason, GitLab CI doesn't support that yet. So it's not as advanced. It still can do caching, but not as advanced as the others. As for sharing steps, they do it in different ways, but pretty much everybody supports it. CircleCI uses orbs, which is something that I didn't know until a couple of months ago. You can, for example, I discovered orbs where in the last project I was working on, I wanted to use Cypress to do end-to-end testing, and Cypress offers you an orb where you can just say run jobs, and it has the whole environment with all the dependencies that Cypress needs to run. So that's, and you can also create your own orbs and distribute them. Travis CI, I haven't found anything on the docs that say that you can easily share steps or commands in between repositories. GitLab uses the include statement, which is great because it's not just for commands, but also for configuration. If you can say include and then reference the repository and slash the command or template or any other thing that you want to share, and there you go. And GitHub Actions, they included this in core because in GitHub Actions, every step is an action. So checking out is referencing an action, and doing many other things, they are done by actions. There is even like kind of a marketplace where you can search for popular actions so you can use them. So they started their CI having this in the heart. As for running jobs locally, as I was saying, see, Travis CI doesn't allow you to run jobs locally, so that's a pity because it may slow down development. And GitHub Actions, same thing. As for SSH access, Circle CI does. Travis, this is interesting because for public repositories, maybe it's because of the amount of stuff that they have running there, or amount of people who have using Travis CI, you have to request them. You have to send them an email telling them, can I have SSH access to my jobs in my public repository? And they'll reply to you, at least they did to me, and tell you, yes, now you can do it. But it's tricky. You have to pass that stage so you can do it. And GitHub Actions and GitLab, they don't support it, unfortunately. And finally, as for running on premises, I discovered that GitHub Actions, maybe they say that it's temporary. You can do it for, they can do it for a repository, but you cannot, they don't allow you yet, if you're a large organization, to install GitHub Actions on your infrastructure and run it for all of your repositories. They may eventually, because they didn't say that they don't want to do it. Before I change to this, any questions so far? Otherwise, we can skip to the end. I'm going to make this session short, so if anybody wants to not just making questions, but give some feedback, I always learn a lot from these kind of sessions, so feel free to do it. Just ask for a mic. I'll mention it at the end. I was working a few years ago with my colleague, his nickname is Deviant Integral, but it's Andrew. We were working for a media corporation that had like 40 TV channels, and each TV channel, they had their own development team. Some TV channels had more, some teams had more than one TV channel, but each of these was a Drupal project. I was part of the team that maintained modules, aka plugins, for each of these development teams. So we had to do a lot of CI with these modules to ensure that they were working fine. Initially, by the way, the screenshot is from DrupalCon Nashville. 2 years ago, I gave that session, so this is where I'm taking the stats. We had, this was the scenario. There were 8 developers. We started with like 5, 10 repositories, and then we went up to, I think, 25 or something like that. Each repository was a Drupal module. And each pull request that somebody would create would check coding standards, unit test, end-to-end test against a simulated full Drupal site, code coverage, things like that. And in average, we had like 8 pull requests, more or less 24 commits per day, depending on the days, how busy we were. And there were some people that would run tests locally via just command line, but the majority would just push the code and wait for the result. As for the architecture, we were given an Amazon EC2, a server, where we installed Jenkins. And it was easy, as I said, because it's Jenkins, so you just install it, and then you start managing it via the web interface, which is great. However, the server is always adding to your bills. The client was paying for that because it was his infrastructure, so far so good. And we realized that, for example, at the end of a sprint, or whenever we had to deliver something to a particular team, there were spikes in activity, so we had to be aware, maybe upscale the server to a bigger machine for a while, things like that. These were the costs that we had, that we were using an M4, I don't know, that was a large server in Amazon. I don't know if that's large because this is a while ago, with 8 cores, 32 gigabytes. This was more or less $300 a month. And as for concurrency, we discovered that memory wasn't the issue, it was CPU. We could have like 10 jobs running at the same time on this machine, but it was the CPU boundaries that wouldn't allow us more. However, we were fine most of the times with this. We, at Lullabot, we use a time tracking tool called Noco. It was called before Lex Freckle. It's a timer where you can set, I've been working 2 hours on this task or the other. So what I did is that over 15 months, every time I was creating new jobs or tweaking jobs or setting up jobs for a new repository we created, or doing maintenance on the server that was hosting Jenkins, I would type the hashtag Jenkins or CI. It turned out to be hundreds of hours that I spent on this, and the kind of issues that I found were, for example, we were using Docker to run these jobs. Well, for some reason, there were zombie containers. somehow. And I had to debug why was happening. Some plugin would start failing. Some Jenkins plugin would start leaking logs somewhere and filling up the hard disk space. Something with heap, it's just coming to my head, heap memory on Java heap memory that I had to tweak, and it wasn't straightforward. Things like this. And it was time I wasn't building new features for those TV channels. So bear in mind, I'm not a developer. I don't consider myself a sysadmin guy. So some of the things I was facing there were new to me. With this means, given the hours I was spending, that depending on each month, this would be hundreds of dollars or thousands of dollars on top of those $400 that for the server that I mentioned before. So that's what I was saying. Jenkins is free, yeah, but the time that you are spending maintaining it may not be that free. So what we came up as a conclusion was that if you have somebody or a team that is experienced with DevOps, then great, because you may be able to manage your own CI infrastructure, and you will get a lot of it, because if you are in full control and you dominate it, then you can do certainly much more. But if not, starting with a software as a service tool, you can even start with the free tier. In the project I'm working on, for example, it's Circle CI, what I'm using, and the free plan, it's good enough. It may not be as fast as I would love. It doesn't offer me concurrency, but I'm just running 2 jobs every time I create a pull request. Good enough. It was last week, that I got to a point where I used all the minutes or credits that they give me, but I've been using it already for a month and a half. And the good thing about this is that because I have this background of time where I've been using it, I can now go to my manager and tell them, I've been using this, I'm running end-to-end tests here, see this is working, it's giving us feedback, can we upgrade it? I'm not talking about, maybe the upgrade means, $50 per month as maximum, and that will give me a lot of concurrency. So on one side, I'm benefiting from not having to maintain the infrastructure, which is great because that gives me more time to do more feature development or bug fixing. And then on the other side, it turned out to be, okay, it turned out to be cheaper. Can I speak? Okay. Right, these are some books that I've been reading lately. I started looking for DevOps books in general, and I don't know if any of you have read them, but these are great, all of them. And here are also some links of articles I have written, repositories I found interesting. I've tweeted the slides, so I'm going to pass to the next slide and you'll see my nickname. If you want to read the slides further or you want to open the links, they are there. And I don't know how much am I going on time, but anyway, we have plenty of time. If you have any questions, please ask for a mic so it can be recorded. Questions, anybody? Is there any mic around? ¿Hay un micrófono? ¿El qué? Vale. So I'm doing, okay.
Thank you. You were talking about Jenkins and the cost that you may incur in hours of maintaining Jenkins. We've been through some experience in Jenkins, but in your experience, what are the recurring costs in front of the first-time costs that you think you incur using Jenkins CI?
So let me see if I understood the question. What are the recurring front-end costs of using Jenkins, right? I think it's just the server where you're hosting it.
I mean in human resources, yeah.
Yeah, so that's the thing. If you do the maths, I spent 115 hours. So what we did there was we multiplied that by the, how do I say this in English? By my rate. Like the rate they were charging per hour for my work. We mentioned that to the client, like, look, Juampy is spending this amount. Juampy charges this rate for you per hour. Do you really want to go this way, or do you want to move to another tool? So in your particular scenario, I would do the same math. Like check whoever is maintaining the infrastructure, calculate, multiply the amount of hours in a given, it doesn't have to be 15 months, just do it for a week or 2 weeks. So you can get some numbers, and that's it. It's open source software. If it's free license, it's free, but time it isn't. And in most of these scenarios, I discovered that it's the human time that is the very expensive one, and not the resources. Did I answer your question, by the way?
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay.
Muchas veces la elección de la herramienta como SaaS, ¿no? O como PaaS, o como se decida, también viene mucho por la seguridad en las comunicaciones. Por eso se elige muchas veces instalar un GitLab on-premise con su Jenkins on-premise. Con respecto a tener el GitLab CI, ¿qué diferencia hay en la elección de la seguridad, las comunicaciones, la encriptación?
Vale. Just for the recording, the question was about what are the security concerns of using each of these software as a service tools not on premises, right? I know little about security, to be honest. So I'm not sure I'm the best person to answer you. I'm sorry, but I can tell you that Turner, for example, it's a large media corporation that they have some of the, like NBA.com or Cartoon Network. They're fine with that. So they don't have any issues with communication. Would you like getting the mic?
Pero bueno, es para responderle más o menos a él. Cuando te comuniques con algunos repositorios puedes usar keys encriptados. Entonces, si vas a usar código seguro, o sea, código que no quieres que pase, siempre puedes comunicarte con los repos con keys. Y ese fuera el caso.
Para desplegar esos paquetes en cloud.
¿Os importa seguir después? Es que si no, el resto de la gente, perdona. Sorry, it's just because nobody's going to follow the conversation. Any other questions? Yeah.
Cuando estás diciendo un jobs local es los jones, ¿no?
¿El qué? ¿Puedes repetir?
Cuando estaba la tabla que indica CI, el Travis CI, el GitLab CI, no caso el local jones, local. Sí, un jobs local es los jones. Está indicando, por ejemplo, el GitLab.
El checksum, dices.
Run jobs local está se refiriendo a los jones, ¿no? Sería lo GitLab para tú ejecutar los CI de GitLab. Tiene que
I'll run. Sí. So the question was if how does GitLab CI can run jobs locally, and yes, it's via a runner. So you set up a runner locally, so you can simulate what GitLab does on the cloud for your jobs on your local environment. Is that your question?
Sí, no caso cómo que funciona el Travis, el Travis no tiene, entonces tiene que es algo aparte. Vale.
No sé cómo lo hacen. So the question was about how does Travis do it. It's not in the docs, so I don't know.
Pero al final en un proyecto que estoy tiene un host de GitLab y tiene un host de Honey. ¿Está correcto esto? O tiene dos hosts, uno el GitLab repo y el otro está los Honey en modo Docker, una cosa así. Es una manera correcta.
Yo lo hago así, sí.
Vale, de acuerdo.
Yeah, so what I was saying is for Travis doesn't offer you a tool to run your jobs locally. What I did instead was I used a Robo, the task runner, as a wrapper for my job. So my jobs in Travis were just one line, like run this job, and this job would do Docker Compose to build environment. So that way locally I could do Robo run this task, and that would be like 70% close to what Travis is doing. So that's how I overcame the fact that they weren't offering me a tool to run locally. Any other questions? Okay, I have some stickers here in case anybody wants to take them, and a remaining book. Thank you very much.